I've gotten to that point in my channel growth where I have a dedicated disliker, one of those classic people. Now, he seems to do things in half measures. And I am 99% sure it's a he. He seems to do things in half measures because he'll only dislike it if it has one of these Daily Wire hosts like Andrew Klavan, Michael Knowles, or Matt Walsh. So I fully expect this video to be disliked within the first 2 hours or so. And that's fine. It's just I wish people would dislike more than just those videos. Like if I have a dedicated disliker, I'd want a dedicated. I don't want him to do things in a sort of pathetic, lousy way. No, I want someone who really commits to the task. You see, but at least I also seem to have a dedicated liker, as in every single video I've released in the past year has been liked within like the first 10 minutes of it coming out. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe YouTube just does that automatically to take pity on you or something. I don't know. Because I do have another channel. It's like my personal channel, and I was uploading a meme for my friends. And that got liked immediately as well, as before I'd even shared it with my friends. So I was like, what the? I guess it's a YouTube thing. Either way, if my dedicated liker and my dedicated disliker could ever meet, it'll be, a struggle for the ages. At last, our battle will be legendary, right? If ever they could come together and fight, it would be for this video, where I am actually going to read from Matt Walsh's blog. You might not know who Matt Walsh is. He describes himself as a theocratic fascist dictator. So I think that speaks for itself. He's also variously described himself as a fashion icon, a Virginian, a trans-Virginian, but trans-Virginians are real Virginians, a beekeeper, a fisherman, a PID, person of Irish descent. As we all know, one of the most oppressed classes in all of American history. And that's funny, of course, because it's true. And now he works for the Daily Wire, which some of you will know is Ben Shapiro's company. If you don't know who either of those are, don't worry about it. It's just like an American company that talks about the news from a conservative perspective. But before that, he used to work for The Blaze, which is a similar sort of establishment to the Daily Wire. Also speaks from, like a moderate right-wing perspective. And before that, still, he had his own blog called the Matt Walsh blog, and it had like 1 million followers at one time or something like that. And I wanted to read a couple of my favorite articles from the Matt Walsh blog. I haven't actually read the entire Matt Walsh blog. I just happened to find these two by accident, and I really like both of them. And compared to like the 5 other things I've read on here, I really think these stand out as some amazing, amazing writing. And so I wanted to read it for you guys because, I've read Jordan Peterson stuff on here, and I've read Thomas Sowell stuff on here, and I've read Norm Macdonald stuff on here, and I really want to read Matt Walsh. To me, those 4 guys are sort of, for Final Fantasy fans, those 4 men are sort of my warriors of light. What I really like about them is they all speak the truth, but in very different ways. Thomas Sowell has this factual pursuit of truth based on hard statistics and evidence. Jordan Peterson construes the truth in a more mythological lens, right? It's more based on an analysis of stories and images rather than evidentiary real life. And on the other hand, from these 2 academics, we have these 2 cultural figures, Norm Macdonald, who says the truth, who said the truth in the funniest way that he could. And then there's Matt Walsh, who says the truth in the way that will piss off the most people. And I respect all 4 of those. I just respect their ability to do all of those things so well. And how valuable each of those things are in the pursuit of truth. There's no way to say the truth without making someone angry. There's no way to derive the truth without looking at what actually exists in the world and not just following your ideology or following whatever slogan has been inculcated into your brain. There's no way to acknowledge what is true without noticing also the fact that it's painful, and then to make fun of those painful things to turn it into joy, or to point out hypocrisy, the people who are corrupting that truth, and thus to turn it into a form of justice through comedy. And all of these are good things, but truth is only valuable in as much as it shapes us into becoming better people, right? We become more awake to the world around us, and we learn how to act based on the world as it is, to act in a good way with regards to that truthful world. Does that make sense? I feel like I sort of talked myself into a circle there. But essentially what I'm saying is, if you live in a false world, then nothing you do can be good. Doesn't mean it has to be bad, but nothing can be truly virtuous if you choose to live without truth. And the way we understand those fundamental truths that ultimately shape our soul towards being good, the only way we can really wrap our heads around that stuff is through stories and mythologies. And that's where Jordan Peterson comes in as sort of the final stage of why truth is important and how to communicate truth effectively. So yes, find out what the truth is, observe acknowledge and resolve not only its absurdities, but also, more importantly, I think, the people who want to push forward lies against that truth. Don't be fearful of the people who want you to stop saying the truth. And finally, let the truth shape you into a better person. Those are the lessons I've learned from my 4 Warriors of Light. I've read work from all 4 of them now on my channel. This is going to be the last one. This is going to be from Matt Walsh, talking first about marriage and about what it means to vow yourself to someone else. The price of reneging that vow, the price of proving that vow to be a lie, which of course ties back to all this stuff I've been telling about the truth, right? You can, of course, ally yourself with the truth, but you can just as easily, and of course everyone has, you can ally yourself against truth as well, and it's very easy to do. You can say just the smallest lie that you can possibly imagine. And you might even want it to be true, right? You might want with all your heart to believe a certain lie for your own benefit or even for someone else's, but if it's not the truth, then you are an enemy of truth. Breaking your wedding vows is just one way of doing that. Then he talks about his daughter, just how frightening a concept it is to him, but also to, I think, any of us, that we have to raise children and a new generation beneath us in this rotten culture that we've woven for ourselves, full of pornography, full of an indignity and a lack of respect for the human soul, right? What the hell are we going to do about that? He has a similar video, and I'll put it in the description, where he talks about the effects this culture has on boys. But here he's writing a letter to his daughter. His first children were twins, a boy and a girl. So we kind of get the boy aspect in his video, and we kind of get the girl aspect in this blog. So, yes, the Matt Walsh blog. My wife is not the same woman that I married, by Matt Walsh. I can't actually see the date, so sometime in the past, and it has 500,000 shares, which is quite a big amount, and it has a beautiful picture of his wife there, presumably at their wedding. We begin. A reader emailed me last night, saying she was recently invited to her friend's divorce party. She wanted my opinion on the new trend. Divorce party. A celebration of a broken vow. Hooray! We quit on ourselves and each other. Now, let's dance. I'd heard of these things before, but I almost hesitated to believe the emailer's story. I know this sort of nonsense might exist among the consciously uncoupled types in Hollywood, but I refuse to accept it among normal Americans. This is wishful thinking, of course. I'm well aware that many normal Americans are just as sad and pretentious as Hollywood elites, only missing the money and fame that's supposed to come in the package. So I sat down, wrote a few paragraphs, and resolved to finish it today. Then, this morning, at the grocery store, I ran into a guy who reads my blog. We got to talking. After an exchange of pleasantries, the conversation veered into less pleasant territory. He said, "So, what topic are you working on next?" I said, "Well, I got this email." That's a terrible Matt Walsh impersonation. Oh, dear Lord. But he does have that gruff, really ugly, guttural voice from smoking way too many cigars, I assume. So I'm just going to continue. "Well, I got this email about divorce parties, so I think I'm going to write about that." "Okay, what about them?" "Well, just that it demonstrates this cavalier, celebratory attitude towards divorce. I think it's really harmful, and it only perpetuates the problem." "You've been married for, what, a year?" "Well, going on 3. "Going on 3, all right. Take it from a guy who's been married to his current wife for 11, and went through 2 divorces before that. You never know what will happen. Nobody plans on getting divorced, but it happens. People can change. Someday you might wake up and find that your wife isn't the same person you married. It happens. I never thought I'd get divorced, but it happened twice. You never know. Nothing is permanent. People sometimes change." "Yeah, I don't know much about the future, but I know I'll be with my wife until one of us dies. Everyone makes their own choices, but that's ours." "Well, I said the same thing at your age. You think of divorce as this scary thing, but sometimes it's the only way to be happy. You shouldn't stay in a marriage if you're miserable. Things change. You wake up and suddenly she's not the same person you married. It happens. Trust me." "But that's not a reason to get divorced, in my opinion." "I know, but check back in 10 years. "In 10 years, I'll either be dead or celebrating my 13th wedding anniversary. Who knows? Maybe you'll be celebrating your 4th first wedding anniversary." That was basically the end of our friendly exchange. I left angry. This right here. This illustrates the worst thing about our culture. I'm not talking simply about his views on divorce. I'm talking about this bizarre bit of divorce evangelism. This is what we do in our culture, not just with divorce, but with so many other brands of bad decisions. We first justify them, then we advertise and sell them, and then we celebrate them, then we insist that everyone else celebrates along with us. In the case of divorce, it is now a literal celebration with balloons and invitations and cake. But for some reason, when I hear about divorce, I don't feel like popping the champagne bottle or sprinkling the confetti. Is that because I'm too young to understand? I don't think so. Look, I know I'm not a marriage expert. I know I'm not in any position to dole out advice, though I'm probably better suited than a guy who has been married 3 times and still refers to divorce as something that happens to you, as if it falls out of the sky like a space rock from the divorce belt. I know that we are young and relatively naive. Still, we've been through a few things together. We've been married for almost 3 years. We've had 2 kids. We've moved twice. We've driven across Maryland, West Virginia, and Kentucky with 2 screaming babies 5 times. We've worried about money. We've struggled to pay the bills. We've had our laughs, our joys, our fights, our failures, our triumphs. We've weathered our share of storms. We've dealt with family drama. We've had a flooded house. We've had 2 kids sick in the emergency room. We've been angry. We've been happy. We've been tired. We've made mistakes. We've come to understandings. We've failed to come to understandings. We've been on cloud 9 and we've been at our wits' end. We've cried. We've lost. We've won. We're still young, and we're still growing. And our experiences might very well pale in comparison to yours, but I have at least learned one thing from all of this. That guy was right. My wife isn't the same person that I married. When I met her, she was a 22-year-old college student. Now she's a 27-year-old mother of 2. Sure, she still has the same DNA, the same biological identity, and she's still the kind of girl who can appreciate a good beer and a fart joke. Wow. I forgot about that. Who can appreciate a good beer and a fart joke. But she's not the same. That's because I married a human being, not a mannequin. I said my vows to a person, not a computer program. People sometimes change, says the wise sage. No, people always change. They never stop changing. Life is change. Everything is moving. Everything is transforming. Everything is changing all the time. Life is more of a river than a stagnant, mosquito-infested puddle. Dear Lord, look at what this guy has done. He's got me so worked up that I'm speaking in country pop lyrics. Life is a river. God help me. The fact is that you can leave the room for 10 seconds, come back, and everything will be slightly different. That's true of the furniture, the curtains, the carpet, and yes, the people, especially the people. Divorcing someone because they change, you might as well divorce them because they breathe. I'm not making light of it. I know that sometimes people change in a painful and inconvenient manner. I know that my wife could change in ways that don't cooperate with my projections of how she should be and feel and think. I guess that's what people really mean when they say they want a divorce because their spouse changed. It's not change itself they oppose, but changes that challenge them and make them uncomfortable. What they should say is, I want a divorce because she changed in a way that doesn't fit inside my comfort zone. It's hard, I know. Every day I'm relearning this one basic truth. My wife has her own brain, her own feelings, her own soul. We are linked now through the bond of matrimony, but she is still her and I am still me. She is a force, a hurricane, a wildfire. She is not a puppet dancing on a string. She is a self, her own self. Powerful and mysterious. Sometimes she laughs at things that used to make her angry, and she gets angry at things that used to make her laugh. Sometimes I can read her like a book, but sometimes she wears an expression I've never seen. Sometimes she smiles like the world is telling a joke that only she understands. I'm learning her, and I'll never finish studying her book because she's always adding new pages. That's the end of the first half of the blog. I just wanted to quickly comment on something. I know that he just celebrated his 10th wedding anniversary. So on the matter of how long ago this was, it was, I guess, 7 years, right? So 2014. He must have written this around 2014. Another thing that I want to say is that Matt Walsh is fiercely Catholic. Like, he's got a Cairo tattooed on his arm. That's how Catholic he is. He's recognizing a fundamental, I was going to say flaw, but that's not really it, limitation of this Christian belief that a man and a woman are made into one flesh, right? That's what the Bible says, are made into one flesh through marriage, through the sacrament of marriage. But unfortunately, it's not literal, right? It's a form of metaphor. It's a form of truth that Jordan Peterson would have liked. But you are still, at the heart of it, separate from her, right? There is an existential loneliness to the fact of life that you cannot tear yourself away from, nor can you untear yourself from. Right? You can't glue yourself to another human being and thus make yourself any less fundamentally lonely. You are still just that one soul. You may metaphorically be two made one flesh, and I think it's very important that you perceive yourself in a marriage in that way. Firstly, for the sake of the children, right? When man and woman come together to make one flesh, that becomes literal when of that union comes one flesh, comes a single being. The Christians also like saying 1 + 1 = 3 in the context of the Holy Trinity, because the Father loves the Son and the Son loves the Father so much that the love itself becomes this unique entity, the Holy Spirit, and then the three of them become the Holy Trinity. So 1 + 1 = 3. In much the same way, when the man and the woman unite, you get a third thing, which is the one thing separate from but constituent of those two things. And the baby of that marriage is the physical manifestation of that third thing. So acknowledging that phrase, right, man and woman made into one flesh, is a very, very important part of marriage. In fact, I would say it's the fundamental reason for marriage. But all the same, you can't deny the fact that the third thing itself doesn't subsume its constituent two parts. You are still alone in your material existence. You still have only your body and only your soul. And Matt, realizing this, says, I can't let this loneliness consume my understanding of what marriage is and why it's important. Why I should be devoting myself to this other person in this trio. I love her, so that this third thing that holds us together becomes all the stronger, right? He's saying I can't focus entirely on myself and the fact of my loneliness. I can't take pity on myself for the fact that this union isn't physically real. I can't make that the center focus of the union, because that will shatter the union in the first place. So it's very wise from Matt. That's a very important point I wanted to talk about before we get to the second half. And the reason, by the way, why I forgot about the fart joke is because this second page of the blog is the one I have bookmarked, is the one that I like returning to. And it's the one that I read a lot more than the first page. I hope you guys enjoyed this one a lot more, and I hope it answers some of the questions you might have had from the first page. He continues talking about his marriage with his wife. She's not the same as she was when I married her, but that's okay because I didn't marry the person she was. I married her, Alyssa, the woman, the being, the body and soul. I married the totality of her, which means I married her changes, not just that one single momentary version of her that walked down the aisle in that church in Ocean City 3 years ago. Do I have a romantic idea of marriage? Well, sure, but marriage is a romantic idea, isn't it? It's not a fairy tale, but it is something supernatural and exciting. Talk to the people who've been in it for a long time, 30, 40, 50 years with one person, and they'll say everything I'm saying, only with much more authority and even deeper conviction. Life is change. People are change. I'm seeing this play out all around me. As I get older, I drift further apart from some of the people I used to consider my closest confidants. But I let myself drift, and so do they, because circumstances also change. And what I'm realizing is that so many of my relationships were only ever circumstantial. My relationship with my wife, however, transcends the circumstance. If we feel ourselves drift, we reach out our hands and grasp tightly, because I choose to remain at her side and she at mine. And if I ever look over to find that we've somehow lost sight of each other, both now walking alone and lost in that cold night, I will grab a torch and search for her until I find her again. She is my mission, my life's work. and I'd sooner give up my life than give up on her. This is all easy to write and easy to say, but I realize harder to do. That's why those of us out here in the thick of it could always use guidance and inspiration, not defeatism and wimpy cynicism. For my part, I will ignore the people like the guy at the grocery store and the ingrates who throw divorce parties, and instead focus on my parents, who've been married through 30 years, 6 kids, and 11 grandchildren. And Alyssa's grandfather, who very recently lost his wife after 60 years of marriage. He can't speak, hardly at all these days, mostly the result of multiple strokes. But I was there in his living room when he turned to the person next to him and tearfully said, "Partner." She was my partner. And she was a great partner from everything I've heard. Feisty and tough, loyal and loving. That's what I want. One day, hopefully, when we're very old, one of us will die first. The smart money is on me, family history combined with my unhealthy affinity for bacon and red meat, not to mention cigars, you fucking smoker. Whoever is living, while stricken with grief and sadness, will be able to look back on a life of sacrifice and compromise and joy and worry and happiness and tears and passion and love and simply say, "Partner, we were partners." I choose that end. I don't know when it will happen, or what awaits us in the meantime, but that will be our ending. I choose it over looking back 5 years from now and saying, well, she was my partner, but then she changed, so never mind. So we wake up every morning, sort of the same, but sort of new. We look at each other. We introduce ourselves again, and we choose to love who we see. We choose to love. And that's the only thing that will never change. So that's the first blog post I wanted to read. Up next, like I said, it's a letter to his daughter. "Dear daughter, please believe me that you are beautiful," by Matt Walsh. And I think this was also published at around the same time-ish, when probably his daughter was around 2 or 3 years old. There's a beautiful picture of the two of them. Matt Walsh usually has this thick beard, probably for the purposes of hiding his very weak jawline, which, by the way, is why I keep myself clean-shaven, because I do have that manly, broad jawline that needs no beard. But here he happens to have posted a picture in which he is very thinly bearded, and you can see the weak jawline in all of its patheticness. Okay, let's calm down. More importantly, he has this beautiful daughter kind of staring up at him innocently, and it's a beautiful picture of the two of them. Probably Alyssa took the picture when you think about it. And this one's significantly shorter. So for the one guy who really hates listening to these videos, and will definitely dislike this video if he hasn't already unsubscribed, don't worry, dude, it's almost the end. It's almost the end. Dear daughter, I hope you never notice the magazine rack at the supermarket. I hope you never see the billboards on the highway or the ads on the side of the city bus. I hope you never learn about Hollywood and the fashion industry. I hope you never listen to pop music. I hope you never walk down the makeup aisle. I hope you never hate your own appearance. I hope you never pick up the habit of putting yourself down whenever someone compliments you. I hope you never feel the pressure to physically conform to the perverse standards of a disordered world. I hope you always stay exactly as you are right now. Innocent, carefree, unencumbered, pure. But these could only be the hopes of a foolish idealist like your dad. I can rub the genie lamp and make 1,000 stupid wishes, but you will grow. You will start to learn about the culture that surrounds you. You will form opinions about yourself. Your vivacious, bubbly happiness will give way to more complex emotions. You will develop new dimensions. In these times here in your very early life, you only cry because you're hungry or tired, or you want me to hold you. One day, though, your tears will come from a deeper place. And when that day comes, I want you to remember one thing. You are beautiful. Beautiful. A work of art, full of life, exploding with a unique, dynamic, vibrant energy. Beautiful. Eyes like the morning. A strong and powerful spirit, a face that brims with joy and hope. Beautiful because you were formed by God. Beautiful because He has known you since before you even existed. He has loved you since the beginning of time. Beautiful because you're real. Beautiful because you are. Remember this. It's important that you remember it, Julia, as you live in a society that's dedicated to making you forget. Those commercials and movies and songs and cosmetic products and plastic surgeons and diet pills and trendy clothes and Cosmo magazine covers, they will all try to feed you something, an image, a broken promise, a false salvation, a poison, an airbrushed, manufactured, painted over, photoshopped marketing ploy, a sexiness that's about as beautiful and feminine as an assembly line, a hot that's more sterile and processed than canned food. This is the price of living in a culture of consumerism. We all pay the toll, Julia. Your dad included. See, modern humans spend every waking minute surrounded by advertisements, product placements, and carefully crafted focus-grouped messaging of all kinds. It tears you in a million different directions, but the lesson is always the same. You are not good enough. You need to be improved, they'll tell you, demolished and rebuilt, shamed and made over, pulverized and perfected. They pull out their metaphorical shotguns and blow giant holes in your psyche. They hollow you out and convince you that they've done the right thing to plug the gaps. They create a void in your conscience and pour their propaganda into it. This is why we have an unachievable, inhuman, digitized idea of beauty in our society. We've fallen for the ultimate scam, and the scammers have reaped dividends. A little while ago, around your mom's birthday, I had the crazy idea that I would attempt to purchase her some clothing items as part of a gift. By the way, you can tell that your dad is a very hip and trendy dude, seeing as how he just used the phrase, purchase some clothing items. Well, anyway, my quest was unsuccessful. Not to mention bewildering and terrifying. But I feel like I was enlightened by the journey. Apparently, the shops in the mall have collectively determined that every woman is a size 0, and none of them care about dressing modestly. I still don't understand how there can be such a thing as a size 0. All human beings must, according to physics, have some mass, right? Well, of course these stores are wrong. Most women aren't rail thin, and many of them aren't interested in dressing like music video backup dancers. You just wouldn't know it based on the selection at these boutiques, which, it would seem, have a clientele consisting mainly of mannequins and runway models. I guess I've learned to take a few things for granted. As a guy, I can walk into any clothing store and find something that A, fits, and B, provides my body with basic coverage, which is the whole reason clothing exists in the first place, according to Wikipedia. As you will eventually discover, women have an entirely different experience. For them, even something as simple as clothes shopping becomes an all-out assault on their values, priorities, and body image. And women aren't the only victims. Men might not be chasing Hollywood beauty, but we have our own unreasonable expectations, imposed on us by ourselves and the world outside. We all, men and women alike, feel the pressure to present a facade. We all want to appeal to the masses. It's like we're locked in this eternal competition to be beautiful, or popular, or successful, or whatever, except we set our bar for beauty, popularity, and success according to the standards of the very strangers we're trying to beat. We want to be like everyone, and liked by everyone, but also better than everyone. This parallel battle for sameness and superiority wreaks havoc upon our souls, and the damage can sometimes be irreparable. It's gotten worse now with the internet and social media. The struggle to impress our peers has invaded and consumed every minute of our lives. Julia, please understand this. Of the entire population of the planet, only an infinitesimal percentage of them will ever be more than anonymous to you. Only the tiniest fraction will ever give you more than a passing glance. You should still love and respect these strangers, but you don't need to impress them. Be a beacon of charity and truth to everyone, but you don't need to worry about the opinions and judgments of every single person you happen across on the street. It doesn't really matter how they feel about you, yet many of us want to be desirable to everyone, even and especially those we don't know. We want them to feel something when they look our way. Feel what? I don't know. Envy? Admiration? Inferiority? A combination of all three, I suppose. We certainly can't allow them to carry on with their day feeling better or more attractive or smarter or more successful. A silly way to live, isn't it? We gain nothing from it, Julia. We do everything we can to impress the unknown faces in the crowd, and where does that get us? Nobody really cares in the end, anyway. Those faces are likely immersed in their own, self-absorbed psychological vacuums, and whatever impression we make on them will dissipate as soon as we leave their line of sight. We've all become like puffs of smoke to each other, evaporating just as quickly as we appear. It's a vicious, violent, tormenting cycle, and I don't want you to be a part of it. I'll do whatever it takes to see to that, although honestly I'm not sure what it will take exactly. Maybe Mom and I can just hold you close and love you. Will that be enough? And maybe I can just keep reminding you that you're beautiful, even now, when you can't really understand what I'm saying. Maybe if I say it often enough, you'll believe me. Will you always believe me? I hope so. I pray so. Remember, Mom and Dad are two of the very few people on earth who will tell you the truth about yourself. The truth that, from your first moments in this world, you've been like a vision, full of warmth and light. You don't need to be photoshopped or edited or remade or made up, and you never will. You don't need a touch-up or a correction. You were molded by the hands of God and given to us as a gift from paradise. You don't need to add fad diets, expensive shoes, and 40 layers of makeup to the package. You will meet a lot of people in this world, and many of them are out to take something from you or sell something to you. So they'll try to attack your self-image, suffocate your confidence, make you vulnerable, and seize whatever it is they want. That's the game. Never play it. That's the lie. Never believe it. Never believe it. I'll protect you for as long as I can, Julia, but the day will come when I can no longer shield you from it at all. That's why I wrote you this letter. For the times when the pressures of the world, the constant, deafening din, screaming, you're not pretty enough, you're not good enough, become a little too heavy to shoulder, whether it's 7 years from now or 17 or 70. Whenever you need a reminder, here it is. You are beautiful. Love. Dad. I'd very much like a daughter someday. Ich will sie nennen Maya. I want to name her Maya because there's a lot of cultures that use that as a name. It's a very international name. And I don't think it's valuable because it's international, but rather it means that there is a sort of recognizable beauty to that name that everyone immediately perceives. I like to wrap this up with not a Matt Walsh reading, but actually a C.S. Lewis reading, and more specifically, 2 short sentences from the Chronicles of Narnia. The first is from Prince Caspian, where Lucy returns to Narnia for the first time since her original foray, and she meets Aslan, and she realizes Aslan's gotten bigger, to which Aslan responds, and I'm going to try and do an Aslan voice, although I don't really think I can. He's described as having a wild voice, and I have no idea what that means, right? So instead, I'll just do my Mufasa voice, all right? Well, that is because you are older, little one, answered he. Not because you are. I am not. But every year you grow, you will find me bigger. That's a fantastic line. I remember being thrilled through my entire body the first time I read it because it's completely true. And Matt sort of recognizes it in his blog where he says, right now you cry for sort of physical things like hunger, but there will come a time when you cry from a deeper place, right? And of course, Aslan is a representation of Jesus. And Lewis is specifically saying, as your need for a deeper God presents itself, God himself will grow for your needs, so long as, like Lucy, you open your eyes to it. Because she's not only the first of the 4 Pevensey children to realize that Aslan is talking to them, but also the rest of them don't see him for a long time, so they refuse to believe Lucy when she says, hey, Aslan is telling us to go this way, we ought to go this way. And they're like, well, but we gotta go this way instead. And of course, that way ends up being a dead end, so they have to go the way that Lucy has been telling them all along. Lewis is saying, like Lucy, you need to have your eye opened for Aslan, but when he appears, he will not be the way you remembered him, because he grows with you, right? He becomes more fulfilling for you. And Matt very humbly recognizes that he is not Jesus, but he says you deserve something that is transcendent. You deserve something that escapes temporality. And all of these things that tell you Here is how to obtain immortality through beauty, for example. All of those things are fake and false. And I didn't mean to read this, but that also reminds me of another story, this time not from Prince Caspian, but from the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, where Lucy, once again, sees this remarkable magic spell in a spellbook that tells her, hey, you can be beautiful. You can be so beautiful that, well, let's read it. She came to a page which was such a blaze of pictures that one hardly noticed the writing. Hardly. But she did notice the first words. They were, an infallible spell to make beautiful her that uttereth it beyond the lot of mortals. Let me read that again. An infallible spell to make beautiful her that uttereth beyond the lot of mortals. That's better. Lucy peered at the pictures with her face close to the page, and though they had seemed crowded and muddlesome before, she found she could now see them quite clearly. The first was a picture of a girl standing at a reading desk, reading in a huge book. And the girl was dressed exactly like Lucy. In the next picture, Lucy, for the girl in the picture was Lucy herself, was standing up with her mouth open and a rather terrible expression on her face, chanting or reciting something. In the third picture, the beauty beyond the lot of mortals had come to her. It was strange, considering how small the pictures had looked at first, that the Lucy in the picture now seemed quite as big as the real Lucy. And they looked into each other's eyes, and the real Lucy looked away after a few minutes because she was dazzled by the beauty of the other Lucy, though she could still see a sort of likeness to herself in that beautiful face. And now the pictures came crowding on her thick and fast. She saw herself throned on high at a great tournament in Calormen, and all the kings of the world fought because of her beauty. After that it turned from tournaments to real wars, and all Narnia and Archenland, Telmore and Calormen, Galma and Terabithia were laid waste with the fury of the kings and dukes and great lords who fought for her favour. Then it changed, and Lucy, still beautiful beyond the lot of mortals, was back in England, and Susan, who had always been the beauty of the family, came home from America. The Susan in the picture looked exactly like the real Susan, only plainer and with a nasty expression. And Susan was jealous of the dazzling beauty of Lucy, but that didn't matter a bit, because no one cared anything about Susan now. "I will say the spell," said Lucy. "I don't care. I will." She said "I don't care" because she had a strong feeling that she mustn't. But when she looked back at the opening words of the spell, there in the middle of the writing, where she felt quite sure there had been no picture before, she found the great face of a lion, of the lion, Aslan himself, staring into hers. It was painted such a bright gold that it seemed to be coming towards her out of the page, and indeed she never was quite sure afterwards that it hadn't really moved a little. At any rate, she knew the expression on his face quite well. He was growling, and you could see most of his teeth. She became horribly afraid, and turned over the page at once. It's very interesting that Susan is contrasted here with Lucy, because right at the end, this is the actual second thing that I wanted to read. Susan is the one who is sort of captivated by the idea of her beauty, right? She gets totally absorbed in herself and her image, and in a sort of narcissistic way concludes that Narnia was just a childish fantasy, and she never actually went there in her childhood, and all the other Pevensey children should really forget about it as well. "Sire," said Tyrion, when he had greeted all these, "if I have read the chronicles aright, there should be another. Has not your majesty two sisters? Where is Queen Susan?" "My sister Susan," answered Peter shortly and gravely, "is no longer a friend of Narnia." "Yes," said Eustace, "and whenever you've tried to get her to come and talk about Narnia, or do anything about Narnia, she says, 'Oh, what wonderful memories you have. Fancy you're still thinking about all those funny games we used to play when we were children.'" "Oh, Susan," said Jill. "She's interested in nothing nowadays except nylons and lipstick and invitations. She always was a jolly sight too keen on being grown up." "Grown up, indeed," said the Lady Polly. "I wish she would grow up. She wasted all her school time wanting to be the age she is now, and she'll waste all the rest of her life trying to stay that age. Her whole idea is to race on to the silliest time of one's life as quick as she can, and then stop there as long as she can." "Well, don't let's talk about that now," said Peter. So yes, that gives an impression about what Lewis feels about people who sort of become convinced by the culture they're surrounded by, that there are things more important about your physical body and about presenting yourself in a certain way and about what other people think about you than about your spiritual existence. And Matt, of course, identifies something very, very similar. Lewis had no children of his own. He had stepsons, but no daughters at all. And so I think from Matt here, we get a very different perspective of a father so desperately wanting to protect his daughter from the whims of a culture that obviously does not care for her. You only have to think of something like OnlyFans to realize just how rotten the culture is for the daughters of our culture. Anyway, this was supposed to be like a 15-minute read. I didn't expect it to turn into quite a video this long. So, yes, let me wrap up the video here. Tell me what you think. Obviously, like or dislike the video depending on how you feel about it, but at least watch the video. Don't dislike it just because I uploaded it or just because I'm reading Matt Walsh's blog. Once again, talking about superficiality. There's only so much that it will do for you, and ultimately it will corrupt and it will destroy you to constantly be associating with only the most surface level understanding or interpretation of a name like Dargosian or Matt Walsh. You don't get anything out of that. And I would prefer to have 0 likes and 0 dislikes on a video like this. I was going to say, and 0 views. And in fact, I would even prefer to have only like 3 views if it meant I could have 15 comments. Leave your thoughts. Really think about these blog posts. And leave those thoughts, right? Communicate them. If not to me, then at least just for your own sake. Organize your thoughts. Put them into words. Tell the truth. Don't be afraid of what people will say against it, as Matt Walsh teaches us. Entertain us with it, as Norm Macdonald has taught us.
I'm Norm Macdonald, and now the fake news. Well, it is finally official. Murder is legal in the state of California.
Know it backwards and forwards. Know why you're coming to your position from the angle that you are, as Thomas Sowell teaches us. And of course, use it for good, as Jordan Peterson and his stories tell us. Do 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 la la